Hello everyone, it's Richard from Ziptales. Welcome to today's webinar. Today we have Professor Karen Stagnitti with us. Karen is an occupational therapist by training and has worked for over 30 years with children, families and teachers. In 2003, Karen was awarded a PhD for her research into children's play. She developed a norm-referenced standardised assessment of a child's ability to spontaneously initiate their play. Out of this developed her Learn to Play program. She has over 80 published papers, 20 book chapters and 6 books. Her work on play has extended to the value of embedding play in the curriculum. She has worked with several schools in field research and upskilling teachers. If you have any questions along the way, we invite you to ask them using the text chat box over on the right-hand side of your screen. So, Karen, take it away.
So thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. In this webinar, I'll be discussing play, and in particular, I will go through different types of play, pretend play development, pretend play and links to literacy and learning, and play-based curriculum, just some findings from local research. The term play is very broad and covers lots of behaviour that we see in children. So I'll go through the main types of play and then concentrate on pretend play because there's a growing evidence around the links between this type of play, pretend play, and literacy. So gross motor play. The first type of play I would like to go over is gross motor play. Gross motor play is large muscle movement and play activities like running, climbing, rolling, ball catching, skipping, jumping, hopping are all examples of gross motor play. This type of play is receiving more attention these days because of the increase in obesity, and there are many school programs, I'm sure you're aware of some of them, that focus on physical activity. Physical activity is active play, which is gross motor play. The assumed benefits of gross motor play are improved balance, increased strength, better postural control, and increased self-esteem. Fine motor play. Fine motor play involves the child using the small muscle movements of the hands. Activities like threading, drawing, tracing, Play-Doh, pegboards, scissors, manipulation of small objects and so on are all examples of fine motor play. In the classroom, children are using their fine motor skills on a daily basis. The assumed benefits of fine motor play are increased hand and finger strength, fine motor skill development and increased self-esteem. Manipulating objects in the hand is related to handwriting, and recent research has found that this ability is important for handwriting because children need to move the pencil or pen in their fingers to get a good grip. Visual perceptual play. Visual perceptual play involves visual skills and perceptual skills. Activities such as puzzles, shape matching games, cards, colour matching games and mazes are all examples of visual perceptual play. The benefits of this type of play are thought to be recognition of shapes and letters, like pre-literacy skills, recognition of colours, memory improvement, and children feeling good about themselves. Auditory play. Auditory play involves hearing and listening skills. Play activity examples are I Spy, listening games, and matching the sound games, and words that sound like games. From engaging in these play activities, the assumed benefits are concentration, attention, listening, and links to phonological awareness, attention to structure of the mother tongue, with such things as pragmatics, semantics, syntax, and so on. So sensory motor play, this type of play, has elements of fine and gross motor play, except that it has a sensory element to it, such as playing on swings, which is a sense of movement, playing with mud, sand, water, and feeling objects without looking, or guessing shapes drawn on your back. This type of play is thought to benefit children by increasing coordination, increased balance and body awareness, and also increased self-esteem. So pretend play. Pretend play involves playing as if something or someone is real. It's imposing a meaning on a situation. And there are 3 key cognitive skills that are involved in pretend play. Now these are using an object and pretending it's something else. So for example, using a box but pretending it's a bed. Attributing properties to objects, such as the doll is sick, or the truck is dirty, and referring to absent objects. For example, let's go to the market, but the market's really a spare space in the room. Children who have complex pretend play can play with toys as well as unstructured objects, such as boxes, cloth, and natural materials. The assumed benefits of engaging in pretend play are increased language utterances, increased social competence, increased problem solving, increased self-regulation, and understanding of narrative. Pretend play, I think, is the quintessence of play. When children use their imagination and creativity in play, they are engaging in pretend play. Pretend play is a complex ability, and not all children develop this ability. So I'm going to go through the development of pretend play. I'm going to go through the development of pretend play because many children who come to school have poorly developed pretend play competencies for their age. This has clear implications for their language ability, social ability, problem solving, and flexibility within a group. I will discuss the development of pretend play under 6 headings. These are the play scripts or stories in the play, the ability to logically sequence play actions, using objects as something else, social interaction, role play, and doll teddy play. So first we're going to look at play scripts. When children begin to pretend in play, they start with scripts that are about them. And these scripts revolve around what they do, such as having a drink, talking on the phone, kissing their mum and dad goodnight, eating and sleeping. So these types of play activities help build the child's sense of who they are and what they do. As their play becomes more complex, they then recreate stories about their life within the home and without the home. So for example, children want to help sweep the floor, wash the dishes, fix the car if your family's into fixing cars, and then playing shops or going to the park. As their play develops, they then start to add fictional characters into their play, such as characters and parts of stories from movies, books, computer games, and so on. Now, a good player will add bits and pieces of these stories and characters and weave their own story around these book characters that they love. And a child who is struggling with their play will copy what they have seen and put it into their play without any changes. As children's play becomes more complex, children then start to put problems in their play and carry over stories in the play from one day to the next. With problems in the play goes for longer and the child starts to be able to account for the problem and change the story in response to that. This ability then develops to the point where children can play an idea over from 1 week to the next and can play out a story over 2 to 3 weeks. When their play reaches this level of complexity, there are many problems to be solved in the play and usually many characters to negotiate with. So, sequences of play actions. For children to play well, they need to sequence their play actions logically. This reflects their thinking. If they can't do this, then their play will look like it stops and starts and doesn't flow. So to begin with, children have one pretend action. Now, no, that's not a sequence. For example, they'll pretend to go to sleep, or they'll have cups of tea. Their play actions are similar and are very repetitive. So, for example, you don't just drink 1 cup of tea at a tea party, you drink about 20 or 30. And children may mix up the order of events in the play when they start to begin this type of play. For example, a child may push the truck across the floor and then go back for the blocks that were meant to be in the truck. In the next phase of development, they begin to put 2 different actions together in a logical sequence. For example, feed the doll and put the doll to bed. And as their play becomes more complex again, their action sequences become longer to the point where they can carry out sequences of actions over days and weeks. Being able to logically sequence play actions usually results in a play narrative. So using objects as something else. Using objects as something else is using symbols in play, and according to the research is strongly related to language. Children start by functionally relating objects together, such as putting socks and shoes together, money and a wallet, the remote and the TV, and a cup and a spoon. Children then begin to use objects as something else, but they begin by using objects that are physically very similar to what they are representing, such as a box for a bed or the TV remote for a mobile phone. I work with many children who find this concept very foreign, even though they are attending school. As they become more flexible in their thinking, children work out that they use the same object for many different objects. For example, a box can be a bed, a car, a table, a cave, an oven, and so on. Children then begin to use physically similar objects in their play until they use any object as anything. When their play is very complex, they can use shoes as phones and shells as a car, and they can impose meaning on any object. After they have mastered this ability, they use their language more to describe what the objects represent and how they work. Social interaction. Pretend play can be solitary or it can be social. Social pretend play demands many skills of the child at the same time. Children start by imitating other people and children. They observe others and copy them, and then they move to playing beside others and chatting, but they still have their own play materials. This ability then develops to a child being able to negotiate and cooperate in play, but this takes time. Negotiating requires children to problem solve, to read their peers' emotions, to think of another way to explain their idea or why they should have a turn, and an ability to compromise. Children need to be able to read a social play situation and understand what is happening in order to appropriately enter the play. Social interaction includes not only the ability to play, but an understanding of the social conventions that are required in their society. For example, in my work with Indigenous children, I have observed that taking toys from another's play scene without asking is not rude, because in a collective society, no one owns the toys, and so anyone can play with them. As a consequence, the play of Indigenous children is very flexible. It constantly moves and is very complex. Role play. Role play begins with children imitating others. They imitate people they know and then people they observe when they are out and about, like shop assistants, bus drivers, and doctors. Role play is very complex, and it is not until children reach school age that they can master playing the same role for the whole game. This is because to be able to undertake a role and be someone else, they are required to understand what that person would say, how they would act, what motivates them, what they believe, who they interact with, where they commonly go, and what props you need in the play. For example, an astronaut and a shopkeeper would need very different props, play scenes, conversations, and other characters in the play. Doll teddy play. Doll teddy play refers to that special toy a child has. It doesn't have to be a doll or teddy, but for the sake of this talk, I will refer to teddy. Being able to use a teddy and have a teddy be a character in the play, the child imposes on the teddy what it's going to say and how it's going to act, and this is separate to what the child is doing. For example, the teddy may go on a holiday and go on a boat when the child has never been on a boat. Children begin by using one action with the teddy, such as kiss it goodnight, and then use the teddy in more than one action, such as put the teddy to bed and wake the teddy up and give it a drink. As the teddy develops its own life, the teddy will do things the child has not done, such as get married, fly a plane, drive a train, or fix the other teddies who are sick. As the child's play becomes more complex, their special toy does more complex things and lives a life totally separate to that of the child. This ability reflects understanding of another's point of view. Now, the play matrix. If you put all these skills together, you have the ability to play. The next slide puts all these skills together in a grid. The colours on this slide represent the many different ways pretend play is talked about and understood in the literature. The yellow sections are technically symbolic play. This is when children use an object and pretend it is something else. The play coloured red is most often referred to as construction play, because the child builds blocks into something else. However, in doing so, they understand that you can create a new object from many objects. This is again using symbols in play and is a complex form of object substitution. The next slide is a picture of a child's block construction, which shows a complex building using many blocks. The green shading represents sociodramatic play, this is back on the grid, or sociodramatic play, as it is sometimes called. This refers to play where there is a story and social interaction happening in the play. It is dramatic and it is social. The purple shading is role play, and the square on the left-hand bottom corner is sometimes called thematic fantastic play, where children play fantastic stories such as flying to the moon and taking over the universe. Pretend play incorporates all these aspects of play, and the important thing is that children play using many, if not all of these skills at once. It's no wonder that there are children who do not develop complex playability. Play and literacy. So how is this related to language and learning? Language is the basis of literacy. The Australian curriculum is built around three interrelated strands of language, literacy and literature. In the early years of school, the strands focus on developing children's knowledge and understanding in listening, reading, writing, viewing, speaking and creating. Within the curriculum, students are taught to respond to literature, stories, share feelings and thoughts about events and characters, use appropriate voice levels, body language and gestures, discuss characters and events, and engage in conversations and discussions, and so on. Children do all this when they play. Pretend play and literate behaviour share one, narrative competence, because children's play is narrative to the extent that fictionalised character encounter events in pretend scenes. Children use decontextualised language to convey meaning, that is, the child needs to use their language to explain to others where the play scene is, who is in the play scene, what is happening and what is going to happen. And two, organisation of thinking. If you can't sequence your thoughts or play actions, your play will be all over the place. In terms of language, we now know that symbols are important for conceptual knowledge and language development. In pretend play, symbols are using objects as something else. The ability to understand what is being read has been found to be more developed in children who talk about the play as they play. Where pretend play is almost causal is with narrative language. Children begin by telling stories about themselves and playing out their life events, and they do this before they read. Then children attempt fictional storytelling, and this also occurs in their play. Children then develop their narrative ability to solve problems that are relevant to the characters and timing of the story. By school age, the majority of children possess a basic repertoire of narrative abilities and their play is complex. By third grade, they tell complete stories, and by 11 or 12 years, the average child has mastered story grammar. At this age, pretend play changes. Children pack up their toys, their special toy goes back to just being a teddy, and they are ready to move on to the next stage of life, adolescence. However, the skills they have developed through pretending in play are the foundation for the next stage, such as reading social situations, knowing how to negotiate, using concepts and ideas and turning them around in their head, understanding the roles that people have in life, and how to use language to communicate. Children who have well-developed narrative can think forward and predict what will happen. They are usually less literal to those that have poor narrative ability. Children with poor narrative ability have been found to need to copy others in their play. So, field research in play outcomes. In a local study in Ballarat and Melbourne, we tested the quality of children's pretend play and narrative retell in February, beginning of school, and then again in August. We had two groups of children, 57 children in all. One group of children attended a school with a play-based curriculum, and the other group attended schools with a traditional curriculum. In August, we found that the children in the school with a play-based curriculum had significantly improved in the narrative language ability, and these children also improved in their grammar. So the child's ability to pretend in play can impact on their learning. If you have children with poor language, children who are unorganised, children whose story comprehension is below their age level, children who find it difficult to write a story even though they can hold a pencil well, and children who give minimal answers to questions on a text, or children who find it difficult to predict what might happen in the story, and children who have difficulty understanding the meaning of what they're reading. It may be worth observing their play and having their playability assessed. Children with complex playability have a stronger foundation on which to build their literacy skills than children who find it very difficult to play. We now know that you can facilitate a child's ability to play. After this webinar, we will send out a short list of references to the research and a list of books or other resources to help you set up play-based practices. Thank you for your time, and I hope this session has helped to affirm the usefulness of play in the classroom.
Thanks very much, Karen. I hope it was really useful to everyone, as there were some great insights there. Karen's staying with us for another few minutes to answer any questions that you might have. And in fact, some questions have already come in, so let's go to one of them straight away. We have a question asking about the comparison of narrative by school slide. Would you mind talking to that slide, please, Karen?
Oh, thanks, Richard. Yes, I realised in my talk I hadn't explained this. The comparison by school slide shows time 1 is February, when we went into the schools at the beginning of the prep year, and time 2 is August. And you'll see at time 1 that both schools had the same scores. There was no difference whatsoever, because the numbers on the left-hand side are the actual average scores for the schools. So time 1 there was no difference, and that's where you get the 2 lines touching. But time 2, which was August, you'll see the blue line just goes almost straight up, because the children in the play-based curriculum, it just reflects the huge shift they had in their narrative language, whereas the children in the traditional curriculums didn't shift at all. So hopefully that explains that slide a bit more clearly.
Thanks very much, Karen. Now, Judy from New South Wales has asked the following question. Don't all children play naturally? In other words, why do we need to worry about this? What do you think, Karen?
Well, I thought that too when before I started looking at play, and a lot of people think that children just play naturally, nothing you can do about it. But I've learnt that this is not true. Play, and I've learnt and understood that play is a very complex ability. So some children don't develop play because of some sort of developmental issue, but we have other children who don't develop play because of their environments that they grow up in, and they have no stimulation and they're not encouraged. And we know that some children who do begin to play and then are stopped in their play don't develop their play either. So while the majority of children do play naturally, the ability to develop really complex pretend play doesn't occur naturally with all children, because it's impacted by their development, by environment, by what type of play parents encourage, and other children that they play with encourage. So I think it's becoming more important these days, particularly with lots of screen play coming, where children aren't interacting with others or playing with objects. I think developing pretend play, embedding in the school curriculum is becoming more important.
Thanks, Karen. That's great. Thank you very much. Now, Mark from Queensland says, how much should the teacher actually direct the play? In other words, should the teacher set up characters in a situation really deliberately, or let the children do it? This is
a really good question, and it's about the role of the teacher and how it shifts when you start to embed play in the curriculum. And the role of the teacher shifts because you want children to be able to think about what they want to play and how they want to plan the play. Self-initiated play is incredibly powerful for building children's social skills and their language. So the teacher's role becomes more of a co-facilitator. So you could start, and that's a big shift for a lot of teachers, I understand that. So probably starting with talking to the children about setting up a play scene around a story that's been read or about something that's been carried out in the class, and then working with the children, co-facilitating with the children in what props they would use, what they would need, what characters they would need, and then as the children develop that on their own, observing what they're doing, and then adding questions or adding more things to the play and extending other aspects of the play. For example, there's a lovely story coming out of Israel with children who were developing a shop that was around renting out accommodation, and the teacher came as one of the customers, and through that role the teacher got the children to think of a whole other lot of aspects that the children would have to do. So the children said to the teacher to come back later, and the teacher did, and in that time the students had thought through a whole lot of problems that the teacher had raised, and so had extended their thinking, problem solving and their language.
That's great. Thanks very much, Karen. I think we only have time for one last question. Julie in Victoria says, because you mentioned specifically Teddy, Karen, should the teacher provide Teddy as a character?
Well, you can. This really relates to the question before, and it's around using characters in play. It doesn't have to be a teddy, could be something else. If the school does have resources where they can bring in a teddy, otherwise, of course, you know, when children bring their own, you have a whole lot of issues. But if the school had some characters or teddies, this is another way to use play to increase language and understand another's point of view. So several ways you could do this. The children could decide what sort of role Teddy will play that day, or the teacher introduces Teddy and the Teddy talks to the children. And particularly in prep grade 1, grade 2, even though the children know the teacher's talking, they do relate to the Teddy as a living, breathing being. And it's also very non-judgmental if the Teddy talks, and it's a bit of fun, but it's also, you'll probably get children who are quite shy maybe engaging a lot more. So I would suggest that it would be a nice way to do it, and it might be for some teachers a good way just to start to see the reaction of the children when you're bringing in another character.
That was wonderful. Thanks very much, Karen. Well, look, thank you very much again. That was a wonderful seminar, and I'm sure it's given everyone lots to think about. I'll just sort of finally say, if I may, the PD certificate for this webinar will come out tomorrow. You need, however, to send us all the participants' email addresses in order for us to send those out. And the webinar will be rebroadcast tomorrow anyway, so that people can look at it even if they didn't see it today or want to have another look at it. Thank you very much indeed, Karen. It was really great to have you here, and we do thank you, and thanks to everyone out there who's been listening as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Bye.